Hey there, Mike Mills here. Today I want to talk to you about two things you should never, ever teach. So, two things that you should never teach as a youth leader, as a pastor, as a youth pastor. Two things you should never teach. Number one thing you should never teach is something that you don't know. Now that might seem kind of obvious, but if you were in a section of scripture or you're teaching a topic and you don't feel as though you've mastered the subject matter, do not teach it. Don't attempt to talk about things that you don't really understand. You'll talk yourself all into knots, you'll get yourself into trouble, and you'll confuse your audience. And not only that, but you may end up saying something that is incorrect biblically, which you don't want to do. So number one rule of teaching is don't teach stuff that you don't know. So again, if you've been studying it and you feel like, I think I've got a grasp on this, don't teach it. If you're not sure, write it down. And if you write it down and you find I can orderly put this down on paper and I have my thoughts and it makes sense, there you go. What you might also do is share it with somebody who you respect, somebody with a maybe a greater degree of biblical training than you have, or maybe you go look up commentaries and you see, oh, did somebody come up with the same idea or the same interpretation that I came up with, or am I off in left field? Those are always good things to do. But if you can't write it down, then you're not going to be able to articulate it. What I've done in my own preaching is when I get to one of those places where I have something that I really want to make sure I get it right, I'll write it down and I'll just read it. I don't like to read my messages. I don't like to read sermons. I'm not reading what I'm doing right now. But if I have that thing that I really want to have precise, I'll write it down and I'll just read it right out. And I'll tell my audience, I'll say, I'm reading this right now. I want to read this because I want to make sure we have this just right. So number one thing, don't teach what you don't know. Number two thing that you should never teach. The second thing you should never teach is something you're not willing to practice. If you're going to talk about a topic and you're not willing to put that topic into practice in your own life, don't talk on it. Now, this is one of the reasons I think expository preaching is so beneficial, not just for your audience, but for you, the teacher as well, because you can't skip stuff. You're going verse by verse through the Bible, chapter by chapter. You're going to come up on topics and you're going to come up on subjects that you would never pick on your own before you teach it, even though you might have a mastery of what it's talking about and you might understand the theological implications of all of it. If you're not willing to put it into practice in your own life, keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. Now you might think, well, should I just skip stuff? No, I'm not saying that at all. What you need to do is put that thing into practice. In other words, before I teach it to someone else, I have to learn it myself. And in other words, I have to put it into practice myself. I've heard people say, never study on Saturday for what you're going to teach on Sunday because you need to learn it all week long. You need to put it into practice. Now, are you going to fail? Absolutely. There's going to be plenty of times where you don't practice what you preach. But when you fail, your job is to admit it, to be humble, not to make excuses, but to humbly say, I blew it. I messed up. I didn't, what I told you 2 weeks ago, I didn't put that into practice this week, and I need to apologize to you. That's humility. That's important. So again, don't teach what you don't know, and don't teach what you're not willing to put into practice. And obviously, there's a bunch of other stuff you should never teach. That's all the non-biblical stuff. Don't teach that. But those are the two main things that I've seen in my experience people mess up on. Those are things that I've made mistakes on in my own life. So hopefully that helps you out. Don't teach what you don't know, and don't teach what you're not willing to put into practice. Hope that helps you out. God bless you.